Hey everyone, welcome to Frank Analysis. I'm Franco and I'm joined by Robbie Yeager. He is back. He is an investigative journalist for the MCSC network. He also has a Substack called Politify. Every time he is here, we discuss the financial corruption of politicians, journal outlets, business people. So, Robbie, thank you for coming back, brother. It's really great to have you back on here.
No problem, man. I'm glad to be back. I haven't really done much of, anything really until just very recently. I took a pretty long, hiatus from everything, but I'm back now. So I'm making the rounds because it's been, lots of stuff to cover for sure.
Yeah, you're back with some really important news. It's also really underreported, and if people aren't too familiar with the Colonial Pipeline story, I recommend to check out the previous interviews that I had with Robbie. He's been covering this for about 2 years now, right?
Yep. About two
So
years.
this is again, it deserves more awareness. It's barely even discussed on independent media, unfortunately. But here's one tweet that we're gonna discuss here. 2 years after the Colonial Pipeline's catastrophic spill in Huntersville, North Carolina, the company has finally revealed its new estimate for how much they think spilled. But Robbie, that's only 2 million gallons. That's not too much, now, is it?
No,
what,
it's
what can you tell
actually
us about that?
yeah, that's the largest in U.S.
Yeah.
history now by far. Because the last the previous record was like 1.68 million, and that was in Minnesota, I believe, in 1991. So this estimate, which by the way is a just a rough calculation, it's not even really to be taken as like a definitive total because that has yet to be seen. Uh, but to be that as it may, where we're at now is just seeing this number come out. Even though I hate to say I told you so, but I'm pretty sure I told you so. Like this was going to
Yeah.
exceed or come close to or exceed 2 million gallons by the time everything was all said and done. And here it is. And unfortunately now, eh, the punishment or lack thereof has already come and gone. The cases are more or less closed when it comes to Colonial Pipeline and the investigations that were being done by the federal regulators and state regulators. And, so they pretty much just got away almost scot free when it comes to all of this. As we've covered, months and months ago, probably in June of last year, federal regulators, after putting out a pretty lengthy report saying that the entire Colonial Pipeline was like a public and environmental hazard, that admittedly they thought had the potential for this type of 2 million gallon leak just present throughout the entirety of the
Jeez.
5,600 mile system, right? Federal regulators put out a report that basically said, and I mean, and I'm quoting as closely as I can in a lot of those because I don't have it pulled up, but that's what they said. And then they turned around and reached a settlement with Colonial for no fines at all. It was just basically promised to fix it, and that was it. So flash forward to last month, and state regulators here at the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, they had continued their investigation. They weren't taking no for an answer from Colonial when it come to Colonial's refusal to give new estimates and provide new information about maybe potentially harmful chemicals being used in the fire suppressants and stuff. You know the state agency took them to court, trying to compel them to provide this information. And eventually, of course, Colonial settled with state regulators out of court as well for a whopping fine of $4.5 million, and then 250 grand in legal fees. So not even $5 million in fines for Colonial Pipeline from either the state or federal level. So it's basically, for perspective, they make about $1.3 billion a year in revenue. In 2016, they paid their largest shareholders, which would be Koch Industries, $85 million in just that year alone. So it's probably likely they come in around that annually. So $5 million is literally a drop in the bucket. They literally had no incentive to really ever fix these things or make sure this never happens again,
Mhm.
because the punishments are so minuscule. And this has kind of just been a huge disheartening and like really depressing story to cover. I can tell you that, man, because it's like there is no winning here. We lost the day it happened. There was never
Yeah.
going to be any punishment realistically, and now it's just kind of dealing with the aftermath of that. And how do we go from here?
Yeah, it's crazy how they knew a long time ago that something like this would have happened, and now that it's happened, like how close do you think they are to being fully cleaned up? Have they made any statements about that?
So, I mean, federal regulators, as part of their settlement agreement with Colonial, requested a list of all of the exact type repairs made to the system that were the type of repair that cracked in North Carolina that spilled the 2 million gallons. Colonial Pipeline has apparently provided that information, and allegedly they say that they have replaced all of those what they call type A sleeves with type B sleeves, right? So everything's supposed to be all better now. Um, but I'm not buying it, and nobody else should either, because here's the problem. you know, I just put out a report today because the hits just keep on coming. That in a final supplemental incident report that Colonial just filed with the federal agency PIMSA, or the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, um, they basically had to put out one last summary of what happened to this before the case was officially closed with the agency. And in this report, they admitted to never directly assessing or pressure testing the section of pipe that leaked uh, since its construction, until they discovered a possible problem in 2004, right? So 16 years prior to the leak, they went out there and they did perform one test where they essentially injected particles into that section of the pipe and used magnets, right? So to basically form an image or of sorts to find a possible crack or something, right? It was a very non-invasive test. And honestly, it was just basically to find out if there was a hole in this area. And they did find something. So that's where that original type A repair
Hmm.
was made. Um, and they never came back. They never examined it ever again, until, of course, 16 years later, when uh, the report that also states that this leak could have been leaking. They believe that it started July 27th of 2020. It wasn't discovered, and by the way, Colonial didn't discover it. Two kids discovered it while they were
Yeah.
riding their ATVs near the site, but when it was discovered was August 14th of 2020. So that means this leak could have been going on for at least 18 days undetected. And the pipe is buried only 3 feet below the surface, but Colonial Pipeline literally never actually tested it before the original repair was made. So that's, who knows? The construction of Colonial Pipeline started in 1962. Um, According to Colonial's own numbers, 90% of the Colonial Pipeline that runs through North Carolina was built prior to 1980. So just using the odds, I mean, there's no way to exactly know when this section of pipe was built, but it's likely more than 40 years old. So to say that they never checked it prior to, let's say, I mean, 2004, that could be like at least 30 years without ever directly testing or inspecting that section of pipe before the original problem. Then they go down, patch that problem, do one little quick test to make sure everything's good, and then they roll out and they don't come back until somebody calls them back 16 years later. Um, that makes it nearly impossible to have a safe pipeline. It wouldn't matter what you were doing, but is it any wonder why they keep spilling shit everywhere? I mean, because we just
Yeah.
heard that they had another accident in Tennessee just a few months
Yeah.
ago, or maybe it was last month. Time is tripping out for me. But that should be a huge story, in my opinion. And finding out that, hey, there was this pipeline that spilled 2 million gallons. Oh, well, they never checked it. It's not like I'm just using hyperbole. They literally never checked it. They didn't check it. Okay, like the test they did run was something that they had noticed after the fact, that there was probably a problem down there, which seems to be not just Colonial, not just but the agencies that are in charge of this. It seems to be their mo when it comes to pipeline safety is you know we're not going to act until the disaster has already happened, right? We're not going to take any kind of safety measurements to prevent things from happening. It's always react, react, react. It's never, you know, trying to prevent. That old adage that said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. There's lots of cliches out there, but damn it, if that's not like one of the truest ones I've ever heard. If there was actual steps taken to prevent, like inspecting your pipeline, then you might have found something way earlier. If you did it on a regular basis, you would have noticed that the area was corroding for 16 years as the
Yeah.
environment around it changed. But they never came back. They never checked it. So is it any wonder there's no telling how many cracks and holes are in this thing right now? Most of it's freaking 40, 50, 60 years old, man.
And isn't it a horrible business decision too? Because aren't they having so much financial losses because of this? Like if they had just invested in investigating any cracks or seeing if they had to make any adjustments or changes during those 18 years, wouldn't they have saved money in the long run? But is it because they're so focused on making a profit in the short term that they were so myopic in this scenario?
That's hard to say. I mean, I feel like they would definitely save money if you just fix the shit, maintain it. It's not even fixing it. You're trying to maintain it.
Hmm.
You're trying to prevent it from having the accidents in the first place. That's how you maintain a good reputation as a company, whether you're in the pipeline business or you're in the food industry. Making sure that you're always doing the right thing the right way
Yeah.
to achieve your results is it's just good business practice. So maintaining the cleanliness and the operation of your pipeline is the same thing, in my opinion, as like a restaurant maintaining the cleanliness of their kitchen.
Yeah.
People, like it's just part of it. If you're trying to do this the right way, you'll gain a reputation. But see, now they've gained the opposite reputation because this thing's fallen into disrepair all up and down the eastern seaboard. Um, but here's the problem, Franco, and you and Nico, I can name them all, Misty, Kit over at Harlan's Media, Indie Left News, like all these guys, like you guys was a very close knit bunch of journalists who actually have invited me on, not just me on, but actually covered the story, right? Um, but where were where was everybody else on this?
Yeah.
Even at 1.2 million, when we found out that Colonial had covered up their estimates, for months and had to revise them over and over again. When we find out, oh no, they first said it was 63,000 gallons. Then they said it was 264,000 gallons. And then a few months later, they said it was 1.2 million gallons. And now a year later, they're saying that is 2 million gallons. What are they going to say a year from now? How big is it going to be then? Right. And what is it going to take for people that claim to care about the environment, like, the progressive politicians, the Justice Dems, the organizations like Sunrise, Greenpeace, like Sierra Club, you just go down the list, right? Where were they on that? They didn't say a word, and it was, kind of strange because I thought they cared about the environment. I thought they cared about fracking and oil pipelines and gasoline pipelines. Um, but they were nowhere on this. And even after the information was coming out, they were nowhere on this. And neither was most of indie media. Neither was most of progressive. I mean, mainstream media is, they're in the pockets of the oil companies. They're not going to put a lot of attention on this. But there are people that are supposed to be like on the side of the environment in media who, spend all their time talking about, who have spent hours and hours talking about DAPL,
Yeah.
uh, that haven't even mentioned the Colonial Pipeline. And this has just been a giant failure on all sides. I believe personally that had there been major, wave of media outcry, right, in the beginning, then that would have, influenced the people that are reading and taking in that media to pressure their politicians to make statements and to do something, substantial, or at least take a position on this issue, right? Which in turn would have created political pressure to make an example out of Colonial Pipeline. This is the only way this works. But since indie media and media as a whole really didn't do their job, progressive media as a whole basically didn't do their job, and then the activists' role can't be ignored either. The environmental groups that claim to care about Green New Deal, and climate change, in fracking, all this, they were nowhere. And because they were nowhere, politicians didn't care because there was no reason to.
Right.
Nobody was making a fuss out of it. And, being the cynical person, I might be wrong, but I think you'd agree with me. Politicians tend to only care about things that they can fundraise off of and can earn them votes. And, unfortunately, we don't have any justice Dems in North Carolina that are going, everybody
Yeah.
else, it's just kind of left out the dry. If this would have happened in New York, AOC would have been all over it. Um, just just from a perspective of I can get votes out of this. It's happening near me. But that entire group of Democrats in general just they didn't show up for this, and it's just been a really depressing thing, man. Because now we're finding out it's the largest pipeline spill
Yeah.
on U.S. soil in the history of our country, and they got away with it. And now we're gonna just keep finding out even more worse stuff.
So you think that the reason why some politicians or all of them are not talking about this is because it's not anywhere near their district? But what about the activist groups like Sierra Club, 350.org? What do you think is the reason for why they're not talking about this? Would it have to be for the reason that they get paid by certain billionaires and such, and so it would be a against their interest to do that? They'll stop receiving funding from some of those billionaires, or what are your thoughts? Why can they talk
That's
about DAPL but they can't talk about this?
that's a great question.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, I think maybe it's got something to do with maybe we're a red state. Technically in North Carolina, I mean, really it's a purple state, but when you look at the last two presidential maps, we're a red state, and recency bias would, you know, that's just really, what have you done for me lately? That's how politics works. It's how sports works, right? I mean, there's a
Mm.
lot of parallels between the two anyway. So like we know that most of these organizations get funding from a lot of left leaning, what they supposedly or liberal billionaires, really just DNC mega donors who have co-opted what liberalism is or used to be and changed it into completely something different. But they're the ones that fund most of these groups: Sunrise Movement, Sierra Club, 350.org. I mean, that's where all this their funding is coming from. So that's why they're going to focus on the stuff in California and on the West Coast, and they're going to kind of leave the South and the Southeast kind of out the dry. In my opinion, like I said, if this was happening in a blue state up north, it would be on front page news.
Mm.
Whenever I forget which, I think it was was it the San Francisco Bay? I'm not exactly sure, but this was like last year sometime. It was like 100 gallons or something, spilled it, and there was like all this footage of like the water with the oil on it, and it was going viral all over Twitter and social media, and it was just like, okay, that's what like 100 and some gallons looks like. All right, now imagine what 2 million gallons would look like floating down the bay outside of where you live, because that's what's happening, into the environment, here in North Carolina. That's what Colonial Pipeline did. Their report stated that they have to spend over $80 million. They did over $80 million in damage to the environment in the area. They did over $14 million of personal property damage to people that lived in the area. They had to buy out at least 3 or 4 families out of their houses just to, because of the cleanup being so close to the property and the potential for their property being, part of the spill. There's so many like just disgusting things that came out of this story. And again, Colonial is going to, well, I guess they're estimating the total cost of the spill to them. is $108 million. And before we hop over to our next subject, I'll just leave you with this: Colonial Pipeline estimates $2 million is what they lost, right? Um, they also say that the cost they lost 2 million gallons, but the price tag they put on that in their report was $2.5 million. That's $1.25 a gallon. You're that's
Yeah.
pretty you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you're welcome, America. That's how much
Right.
they're paying for the gas that they just dumped on the ground.
While gas prices are going up and everything, it's
Right.
insane. And none of people also talking about people who are not talking about this. There's these people that only focus on climate change when it comes to environmental issues. They never talk about things like this, such as Peter Kalamis of NASA. But yeah, here you brought up the number $2.5 billion. This number also comes up here when you
Yeah.
say lobbyists from some of the leading oil, pharmaceuticals, and defense companies continue to bundle huge amounts for congressional Democrats, giving the DCCC over $614,000 in June. Money that could have, you know, been better spent to help working class people, but instead it's being used to give to politicians to help make them richer, make their donors richer. But they've received $2.5 million plus so far with no end in sight. And then you broke this down in your article here on your Substack on Politify. What do you have to say about this?
Well, this is kind of just, for people that have been paying attention, this is nothing new, right? We all
Mm-hmm.
understand that lobbyists make the world go round, and they definitely make DC go round. That's why we call it the revolving door, right? Well, that's one of the reasons why. But however, the fact of the matter is that lobbyists with all their connections, both on the business side of things and other lobbyists and the politician and the activist group side of things, the dark money side of things, they know where to get money. They know where to get donations. So they there is a practice that lobbyists use called bundling, that they just they gather a bunch of donations that are registered under the people that donated, but they just kind of the lobbyist will deliver them all at once, right? And every month that they receive these donations, the DCCC and the DSCC both report them to the FEC, the Federal Election Commission. And here we go again. After, I feel like, it wasn't it just a couple of years where the DNC was like, we're swearing off oil money, we're not taking any
Yeah.
money from oil executives and stuff like that. This is just a way to get around that, because here we go with lobbyists like Kate Keating, who is represented. She works for the Duberstein Group. She bundled $115,000 for the DCCC in June, just in June, right? And she's personally lobbied on behalf of BP. She's lobbied for Pharma. She's lobbied for Pfizer and Gilead. She's lobbied for Northrop Grumman. This is, the people these are the companies that are hiring her to lobby Congress to get them the most favorable outcome in legislation. Um, a man named Stephen Elmendorf of Subject Matter, another lobbying firm that he's founded. He is the founder of. He bundled $75,000 for the DCCC in June. That means he's bundled over $142,000 for the cycle. He's also represented BP, on issues of oil and gas, and he also represented them whenever it was coming to issues of a methane fee and the reconciliation package, which we all know, was a hot topic, right? But he, representing BP and the industry as a whole, definitely weren't for this, right? So you can go ahead and make the logical conclusion as to what Elmendorf was arguing for in Congress. He's also represented General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, two very well-known military contractors, and also Pfizer, Goldman Sachs, Blackstone. It's kind of like just the who's who list of companies that you literally don't want any money that came anywhere close to, right? If you are supposedly a true liberal, a true progressive, and just somebody that's like, even the DNC, like, it was literally just a handful of years ago, where this was supposedly coming to an end. And It's just how quickly we forget, and they know that, so they just know that the news cycle will get us focused on a bunch of other crap, and then they go back to it. Here's another lobbyist, David Thomas, donated
Mhm.
180,000, or I'm sorry, 74,000. He's given 180,000 so far, or bundled. I should say bundled. These lobbyists aren't actually paying out of pocket; they're gathering these donations and delivering them. But he's lobbied for the American Chemistry Council, a trade association that makes up like Dow Chemical, a bunch of oil companies, basically anybody that burns plastics in America, right? They're all in this same trade organization, kind of like the American Petroleum Institute, but for plastics manufacturers. Uh, I wrote an entire article about their attempt and their member company's attempt, successful attempt, mind you, to kill the plastics tax that was being proposed as part of the reconciliation package. He's also lobbied for Chevron. Um, you know, and I think another notable one here in the article. And if you guys want more, details,
Mhm.
I would definitely go check it out. But Archie Siddiqui, former senior policy advisor to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, is now, a pretty successful lobbyist by all accounts. Now he bundled $105,000 for the DCCC in June, and it's just funny to me that he was kind of, had some, representation for CVS Health, who just happened to be one of the official unsecured creditors of Purdue Pharma. Basically, one of the Sackler family's company that, when they went under, there was this big lawsuit that was like, all right, how are we gonna divvy up all this out? They owe all this money. How are we gonna get our money? Siddiqui was involved in those settlements agreements, that very controversial settlement agreement, and he was working on behalf of the creditors, of the unsecured creditors of Purdue Pharma. And what his actual role in the settlement was is not known, but just that he was involved in that is just like, dude. And of course, he has been hired for Salesforce, who, as we know, with Pelosi filing her latest financial disclosure, owns anywhere between $5 and $25 million in call options for the company that are also based in her hometown of San Francisco. So
Mhm.
it's just a bunch of, seems like pay to play to me. I mean, like we got a bunch of stuff going down, lots of money changing hands, lots of questionable. I mean, and just the ties, like lobbies for oil company. How do we not know that? I don't know. It's a bad look. It's a terrible look, but it's not a surprising look because this is what we've come to be used to from the Democratic Party apparatuses as a whole. I mean, it's just garbage.
Right. So I'm sure the audience can make the connections here on how this is why the Democrats are not doing anything to improve our lives in regards to healthcare, and instead it's exacerbating. People are inundated with that. They keep pushing out for mandatory vaccinations and all that to make money for these pharmaceutical companies, and why they won't efficiently do anything about these oil companies, and allow them to affect people's health with these spills. Um, but also, Robbie, people who present themselves as progressives, such as the Justice Democrats, you revealed that there's a pact that their PAC gets $1 million infusion of dark money. Also, AOC, rather than to call out what's happening here in North Carolina and in Tennessee in regards to the spill, instead of calling out her colleagues for receiving this dark money, she's instead participating in it. And shortly after her fake arrest, which was staged, and you presented evidence to how this was staged, also, and people saying that it was, she sends out an email asking for people to donate money to what exactly? Where was she asking people to contribute $3 to?
So in this email, from what I could gather, when you follow the link to the donation, it's going to take you. It says, and I'm not exactly sure of the names of the groups at this moment, but for sure, one of the name or one of the groups was a. Oh my goodness, it's been like a week and a half now, so I'm trying to like think about what it was, or it's like things have gone so by so. But I know
Yeah.
for sure that it was like a Missouri, or I think it was like a Minnesota. It started with an M. I'm so sorry, I wasn't really prepared for that question.
It's all good. So
But regardless of it, is that at least one of the organizations, right, is involved in spending lots of money, basically placing television and radio ads in defense of, basically, or not in defense of, in opposition to a proposed ban on abortions. And I want to say Missouri. Okay, it could be Minnesota, but regardless, is that there is a very controversial law being proposed by Republican candidates in, I want to say, Missouri, that would be like pretty much banning abortion in the state. And there are lots of liberal dark money groups spending lots and lots of money on ads to influence this bill, right? And that is basically where your money was going to go if you downloaded, or if you donated to that link right there. That is essentially what these groups were doing. And that's where your money would have gone. It basically would have gone into a television ad in Missouri. No, I think that the cause, I don't think that abortion should be being banned. So, you know, that's kind of I'm not going to harp on that too much. It's kind of hard to be like, yeah, like in practice, you're basically asking to donate to a super PAC of sorts, quite honestly, or a dark, some organization that is just, spending money on ads to influence politics at a base level. That's something that we all can agree is a bad thing. Um, but it's one of those bad thing, good reason. I don't know. So I didn't make too big of a deal about that, quite honestly. I think it would have been worse if she was trying to fundraise to her personal campaign. In this case, I think that would have been much worse than what actually happened. So that aspect of it, I'm not going to make a big deal out of. But the whole coordinating with a very much billionaire funded dark money group in CPD Action, or Center for Popular Democracy, to basically publicity stunt stage your own arrest, uh, that is just political theater at, and it's ridiculous, because like you could actually be helping. You're not helping. You're running for reelection. And and that's just what it reeks of. And whenever you do stuff like that, it's not, it's no genuineness to it at all. It takes away, even if you were genuine, once you get this information out that it was staged, and you had like a multi-million dollar dark money group coordinating everything, and you were supposed to get arrested on TV, just, oh well, it's a publicity stunt, that's what it's for. Yeah, but it's also, doesn't it this seem childish? Like, there are
yeah,
actual protesters out there that have, like, that are really, like, grassroots
really
level
getting arrested.
people that are out
Yeah.
there. Yes, and you're handcuffing yourself, and that's just, it takes away, as soon as you go out there, it makes the attention more about you than it does about what's actually being protested, because all the headlines had really no, like, the word abortion was kind of cut out of the headlines completely. It was AOC gets arrested,
Yeah.
instead of massive. I just feel like it wasn't a good move, and she got dogged for it. So hopefully, you know, but we know she's going to do it again. They
Yeah.
they cannot stay away from the limelight. They have to have it.
Yeah. Staging an
Trust
arrest is such a politician move.
At
And
100%, dude. It was so cynical and just like so in poor taste. Like, it's not just like you genuinely, just naturally, organically showed up at this protest. Like, you showed up to, like, we are going to, just make a spectacle out of ourselves. I think it took a lot away from what was supposed to be an important protest. Because I don't think CPD coordinated the entire protest. And even if they did, or were the main sponsors of it, you have to understand that so many people out there don't understand, have never even heard of dark money groups, let alone understand how they influence others to do these things. So, a lot of people might have just heard of, hey, this is a protest about something I care about. And most of the people out there probably were genuine protesters, with like the sleeper cells of sorts being, mixed throughout, that were, that worked for the group in question. So I kind of try to draw the distinction, is that that's how these groups operate. We see that, right? It's just one small group being able to influence another group under the guise of something that the majority care about, when in reality it's just usually a DNC mega donor or two or three, uh, trying to influence politics via manipulating the public to to protest certain issues or stuff like that. It's really like 3 4D chess type shit, and a lot of people don't understand that. They're just going to a protest, and those people got overshadowed by AOC and Ilhan Omar's stupid stunt that they pulled.
Yeah, sorry, the internet was cutting out, but for sure, man. Robbie, you're one of the best journalists out there. It's great to have you on. It's great that you're back. So, where can people find you, sir?
Like again, Jaeger.substack.com. That's the Politify Substack. I'm starting to get more active on that. Right now, I'm focusing on the Colonial Pipeline stuff. I'm checking in on politics here and there. So I mean, you can follow me on Twitter at RobLittlefire. But other than that, Franco, thanks for having me back on, man. It's been too long. Hopefully, we can do it
Yeah,
again soon.
absolutely, man. Everybody, you guys should definitely follow Robbie Yeager. Important work out there. Take care, everyone. Stay informed.